My friends, let us begin this hour together by turning quietly within, just for a moment, because the entire message I want to share with you rests upon a single, simple truth that cannot be grasped with the mind, but must be felt in that still center of your being. And that truth is this: the activity of God begins the very instant the activity of fear ceases. It is not that God has been absent, nor that divine grace must travel some distance to reach you. It is simply that panic fills the inner chamber where the presence wishes to reveal itself. And as long as that chamber is filled with fear's noise, the still small voice cannot be heard. All your life you have been taught to deal with appearances as if they possessed power of their own. A bill comes due, and the heart tightens. A symptom appears, and the mind leaps into conclusions. A relationship trembles, and suddenly you feel separated from peace. But I say to you, none of these have any power in and of themselves. They borrow their seeming strength from your belief in them, and from your belief that your safety lies somewhere outside your own consciousness. In this message, you will discover that the moment you stop giving conditions the authority they never possessed, something remarkable takes place not in the world, but in you. And once it takes place in you, it must appear as harmony in your affairs. We shall explore together how panic arises from the false sense of two powers, how fear blocks the experience of God's grace, and how the simplest pause, the gentlest turning within, becomes an opening through which the infinite begins its silent activity. You will see that your life does not transform because you manipulate or struggle or strive to make truth operate. Your life transforms the moment you cease interfering, when you stop trying to push the river and allow the river to flow of itself. Let this be clear from the beginning. The shift we speak of is not gradual. It is not earned through discipline or spiritual ambition. It is immediate. The very instant recognition dawns. And because it is immediate, it is available to you now, here, in this very breath. You do not need a better body, a better mind, a better situation, or a better past. You need only the willingness to stop leaning upon fear and to rest your weight upon the unseen presence that has been carrying you from the first moment of your being. As we proceed, remember this: no one has ever found God through fear, anxiety, or desperate effort. But every soul that has found the presence has done so in a moment of quiet surrender, when the noisy activity of the mind subsided and the heart opened to the realization, I and the Father are one. It is this moment we prepare to enter. It is this recognition that changes everything. Now let us go deeper, for unless this point is clearly understood, all spiritual work remains fragile and uncertain. Panic, fear, anxiety, these do not arise because of the circumstances before you. They arise because somewhere within there still lingers the ancient belief that there is a power apart from God, a power capable of injuring you, depriving you, or separating you from the harmony of your source. And as long as this hidden belief remains, the mind will continue to tremble at every disturbance of the outer world, for it imagines itself at the mercy of forces beyond its control. What is the origin of this belief in two powers? It is born of the assumption that spirit and matter stand in opposition, that God governs the invisible realm while something else governs the visible. And from this mistaken foundation springs every fear that has ever touched the human heart. For if matter has power, power to make you sick, power to impoverish you, power to disturb you, then you will inevitably bow before matter, even while professing faith in God. If people have power, power to harm you, power to betray you, then your peace will rise and fall with their moods and their actions. And if the world itself is a power, its economy, its politics, its movements, then the soul becomes like a tiny boat tossed upon a storm. But hear me, there are not two powers. There is one presence, one life, one law, one substance. And when this is recognized, truly recognized, not as a comforting thought, but as spiritual fact, the entire root system of fear withers in a single moment. You may still see conditions that appear threatening, but you will no longer grant them authority. You may still hear the mind whisper, "What if?" but you will not bow to its suggestions. Instead, you will stand in the quiet realization, God is the only power. Nothing else has power. Nothing else ever did. When Jesus said, "Judge not according to appearances," he was not offering moral advice. He was revealing a mystical principle. Appearances, no matter how convincing, are not power. They are shadows cast by belief, and belief is not reality. The panic you feel is not caused by the appearance. It is caused by your belief that the appearance possesses power of its own. And so, the first great healing in the infinite way is always the healing of this belief in two powers. The moment you see through it, something extraordinary occurs. Conditions lose their ability to frighten you, not because the condition changes, but because your sense of it changes. And when your sense of a condition changes, the condition itself cannot long remain in its former shape. It must conform to the new consciousness that beholds it. Therefore, let us be very clear as we continue. Every fear you have ever felt has arisen from the acceptance of a second power. Every burden you carry today is carried only because you still hold, consciously or unconsciously, the belief that something other than God is operating in your life. The purpose of this teaching is to reveal that such a thing is impossible. And when impossibility is recognized, fear dissolves of itself because it has nothing left to cling to. You are not fighting fear. You are not wrestling with panic. You are not trying to overcome appearances. You are simply withdrawing belief from them, one quiet moment at a time, until the realization dawns. If God is the only power, then all is well. If God is the only power, then nothing else can be. This recognition is the foundation upon which the rest of our work will stand. Let us move now into a truth that is perhaps more subtle, but no less essential for spiritual realization. The false God of human effort. For even after we recognize that appearances hold no power of their own, the mind still insists that something must be done, that you must rush, must solve, must struggle, must somehow push your way into harmony. It believes that safety is the result of sufficient thinking, sufficient planning, sufficient control. And in this belief lies the greatest obstacle to the activity of grace. You see, the human mind has been conditioned to worship its own effort. It takes pride in its accomplishments and despairs at its failures because it imagines itself to be the cause of all things. And so when trouble arises, the mind leaps into its habitual motion, calculating, comparing, projecting, fearing, attempting to orchestrate outcomes as though it possessed the wisdom of the infinite. But the mind is not the instrument through which spirit works. It is the veil that obscures spirit's activity. Understand this clearly. The moment human effort begins, divine activity is shut out not because God withdraws, but because the mind's noise blocks your awareness of the presence. You cannot hear the whisper of spirit while you are shouting instructions at the universe. You cannot feel the movement of grace while you are frantically pushing the wheels of circumstance with your own hands. Human effort occupies the very space where God intends to reveal himself. In the infinite way, we learn that there is nothing for the human mind to do. The mind cannot bring harmony. The mind cannot heal the body. The mind cannot secure supply. The mind cannot direct relationships. The mind cannot govern your path. It tries, yes, and sometimes it appears to succeed, but every such success is fragile, temporary, and tinged with anxiety, for it rests on the unstable foundation of personal will. Goldsmith says, "I can of mine own self do nothing." This is not humility, it is spiritual fact. Nothing the personal self attempts can rise to the level of divine harmony. Nothing the personal self manipulates can result in lasting peace. Only the activity of the invisible recognized, acknowledged, allowed, can bring forth real transformation. So what does this mean for us in practical terms? It means that the moment you begin to strain, you have stepped out of spiritual consciousness. The moment you begin to force outcomes, you have stepped into the realm of illusion. The moment you believe that your thought, your method, your effort is necessary for God to act, you have already obscured the presence of God. But here lies the grace. The instant you stop, the instant you release, the instant you withdraw your hand from the wheel, the divine activity begins. When you relinquish the need to control, something far greater takes over. You begin to sense a wisdom not your own, a peace that does not originate in thought, an inner movement that precedes action. Guidance arises not from anxious analysis, but from quiet knowing. Solutions unfold not through struggle, but through recognition. This is the meaning of let go and let God, but not in the superficial sense often spoken. It is not a plea for God to take charge of what you still secretly wish to direct. It is the profound surrender of the belief in personal power. It is the release of human effort so that divine activity may reveal itself. And so long as you continue to believe that your safety depends on your labor, your reasoning, your planning, you will remain tied to the wheel of fear. But the moment you understand that the only true activity is God's activity, and that this activity flows effortlessly, the instant you stop interfering, you enter a new dimension of being one governed not by the mind's striving, but by the spirit's movement. This is the truth that frees you from the tyranny of effort. God does the work. Your part is recognition. God is the activity. Your part is to become still. God is the harmony. Your part is to cease resisting it. When this becomes the foundation of your consciousness, life shifts from struggle to unfoldment. Nothing is forced. Nothing is chased. Nothing is wrung out of the world by human will. Everything flows from the invisible to the visible, from the inner to the outer, from the kingdom within to the experience without. This is the way of grace. Let us now come to the heart of our work, the recognition of the presence that never moves, never trembles, never reacts, never shifts with the tides of this world. For unless you come to know this presence not as a belief, not as a hope, but as the living reality of your own being, you will continue to be governed by the appearance world, and you will continue to measure your peace by the conditions that rise and fall around you. But the moment you recognize the presence, the moment you feel, not think, but feel that there is a life within you, untouched by circumstance, you discover a center that remains unmoved in every storm. You see, beneath the surface of your thoughts, beneath the emotions that come and go, beneath every mental noise that clamors for your attention, there exists a silent region of consciousness that has never been frightened, it has never been confused, it has never been broken, threatened, or diminished. It is the I that was before Abraham. It is the Christ within you. It is the presence of God as your own being. It does not move with the world because it is not of the world. This presence does not begin when you meditate, nor disappear when you forget it. It does not increase when you study, nor decrease when you err. It simply is permanent, changeless, eternal. But though it is always present, it is not always recognized. And so our work is not to make the presence appear, it is already here. Our work is to remove the veil of fear, the veil of effort, the veil of judgment that prevents us from seeing what is already established within. When Jesus spoke the words, "I am with you always," he was not speaking of a man returning again and again to human experience. He was speaking of the eternal presence, forever, at the center of your being. When the psalmist declared, "If I make my bed in hell, thou art there," he was bearing witness to the same truth. No matter where the human sense finds itself, fear, sickness, lack, despair, this inner presence has not moved an inch. It is there in fullness, in completeness, in perfection, awaiting recognition. And so, you must understand, the presence you seek is not something you must attain. It is something you must acknowledge. It is not something you must call forth. It is something you must stop obscuring. The mind obscures it with its noise. The emotions obscure it with their turbulence. The senses obscure it with their insistence that the outer world is the only reality. But the presence itself is never absent. It is simply unrecognized. Therefore, the essence of spiritual practice is the art of remembrance. Remembering that the good you seek is already here. Remembering that the love you long for is the substance of your own being. Remembering that the wisdom you need is already active at the center of consciousness. Remembering that the peace you chase in the world is the peace that looks out through your own eyes. In this moment, you may pause and silently feel for it, not with expectation, not with strain, but with a gentle turning of attention inward, just a slight shift from the outer to the inner, from the appearance to the invisible, from the mind's activity to the heart's knowing. And even if you feel nothing at first, the recognition has already begun. For the presence is not felt through sensation, it is known through stillness. It is not approached by desire, it is revealed in quiet acknowledgement. As you grow accustomed to resting in this inner stillness, you will discover something remarkable. The presence remains the same in every circumstance. Whether the world praises you or condemns you, whether the body feels strong or weak, whether the bank account rises or falls, the presence does not move. And when your awareness begins to dwell in that which does not move, you too become unmoved, not indifferent, not passive, but anchored in a deeper dimension of being where fear cannot enter. This is the beginning of true freedom. The recognition that the self you are is not the mind that fears, nor the body that changes, but the presence that witnesses all without being touched by any. And once you recognize this, panic falls away, not because the world has changed, but because you have awakened to the one who stands above the world. This is the presence we will continue to explore, for it is the foundation upon which all spiritual demonstration rests. Now, let us look closely at the moment fear actually loses its power, for this is not a gradual process, as the world supposes. It does not require weeks of affirmation, months of struggle, or years of mental discipline. Fear evaporates in the very instant. Consciousness awakens to the truth of one presence, one power. And though we may speak of this as a moment, understand that it is not measured in time but in realization. In a single flash of spiritual recognition, fear is rendered impotent, not by force, not by resistance, but by the simple light of understanding. Fear thrives only in the absence of recognition. It is like darkness in a room. You may fight the darkness, curse it, analyze it, or pray for it to disappear, but nothing changes until someone touches the switch and reveals the light. And in that instant, darkness vanishes, not because it was conquered, but because it was never a power in the first place. It existed only where light was not acknowledged. So it is with fear. It appears powerful only while you grant it reality. It governs only while you believe conditions possess authority. But the moment you withdraw belief just as swiftly as the moment the light appears, fear has nowhere to remain. It dissolves into its native nothingness. Let us understand this with clarity. Fear never departs because conditions improve. Fear departs because consciousness improves. Fear does not recede when the body is healed. It recedes when you realize that the body never held power over life. Fear does not diminish when money arrives. It diminishes when you recognize that supply is spiritual and never ceases. Fear does not vanish when conflict resolves. It vanishes when you know that harmony is not created by people but by God as the invisible principle of oneness. Fear and harmony do not coexist. Fear and God do not coexist. Fear and the realization of omnipresence cannot stand in the same consciousness. The revelation of one removes the possibility of two. And so, what is this moment in which fear loses its power? It is the instant you cease looking outward and turn within. It is the instant you stop consulting the mind and begin listening for the still small voice. It is the instant you acknowledge, even if only quietly, even if only faintly, God is here. God is the only presence. God is the only power. That is the moment fear is dethroned. Do you see? The transformation does not occur in the world. It occurs in you. Nothing outside you needs to shift before fear is undone. You may still see the troubling condition. You may still hear the mind's whisper. But if something deeper in you has awakened, that is enough. That inner shift alone contains the seed of healing, of resolution, of supply, of restoration. Many students experience this as a subtle quieting of the heart, a softening of the inner atmosphere. Others feel it as a sudden release, like a burden that drops away without effort. And still others do not feel anything at all, but they notice that the fear which had gripped them is simply no longer present. The spirit works in its own way. Your task is only to recognize, to acknowledge, to rest in the presence that stands unmoved behind every appearance. Think of how quickly clouds passing over the sun can create the illusion of darkness, and how quickly the light returns the moment the cloud shifts. The sun was not affected by the cloud, it remained as brilliant as ever. The presence within you is just as constant. Your fears are merely clouds of belief passing across awareness. The moment you recognize the sun is still shining, the power of the cloud dissolves. Therefore, I say to you, do not fight fear. Do not struggle with it. Do not attempt to banish it with mental arguments. Simply recognize that it is not a power. It has never been a power. And in the moment that recognition slips into consciousness, even as a whisper, fear's foundation collapses. It cannot stand where the light of truth has entered. This moment of realization is the turning point of an entire life. Now that we have seen how fear loses its power, let us take up one of the most vital practices in the infinite way, non-reaction. This may appear, at first glance, to be a simple instruction, but no principle is more misunderstood, nor more essential to spiritual unfoldment. For every time you react to an appearance, you affirm its power. Every time you rush, defend, resist, or attempt to correct a condition, you declare without speaking a word that the condition has authority. And in that declaration, you bind yourself to the illusion. Non-reaction is not indifference, nor is it denial. It is not the cold refusal to acknowledge what is taking place. It is the quiet recognition that appearances have no inherent power. It is the capacity to meet the world's disturbances with an inner stillness that says, I see you, but I do not bow to you. I acknowledge you as appearance, but not as truth. This is the spiritual poise that dissolves problems at their root. Consider the nature of reaction for a moment. The phone rings with troubling news, and immediately the heart quickens. A bill arrives, and at once the mind begins calculating, fearing, projecting. A symptom arises in the body, and instantly the imagination leaps into dark possibilities. All of this takes place within seconds. Why? Because the mind, trained for generations to believe in two powers, attempts to seize control. It is reaction that keeps you enslaved to appearances. But listen carefully. You do not overcome appearances by reacting to them. You overcome appearances by refusing to grant them power. Non-reaction is this refusal not by willpower, but by recognition. When a disturbing circumstance arises, the ordinary person reacts. The spiritually awakened person pauses. And in that pause, grace enters. In that pause, the mind's habitual momentum is interrupted. In that pause, the presence has an opening through which to reveal itself. Let us picture it. Something frightening appears before you. Instead of rushing to fix it, instead of allowing panic to rise, you gently say within yourself, I will not judge by appearances. And you pause. Just one breath, one conscious breath turning inward. In that single breath, the sense of two powers begins to collapse. In that single breath, you return to the awareness of the one. And in that awareness, reaction becomes impossible. You cannot fear what you no longer believe has power. You cannot defend yourself against what you recognize as illusion. You cannot strive to correct what you see as nothing more than a shadow. Reaction fades because the belief that fuels it has faded. Goldsmith taught that the moment of non-reaction is the moment of spiritual dominion. It is the moment when the individual steps out of the role of a frightened human being and stands as the witness of God's activity. When you do not react, you do not become passive. You become receptive. Receptive to the movement of grace, receptive to the wisdom of the Spirit, receptive to the inner impulse that will guide your next step. Do not misunderstand. Non-reaction does not mean you ignore practical responsibilities. If a child cries, you comfort the child. If a doorbell rings, you answer it. If your body requires attention, you consult appropriate help. But you do none of this from fear. You do none of this from the belief that the condition has power over the real you. You take practical steps, yes, but only after you have first re-established your consciousness in the presence. This is the meaning behind the statement, seek ye first the kingdom of God. Seek the kingdom first, before the reaction, before the judgment, before the planning, before the analyzing. The world teaches, act first, think later. Spirit teaches, recognize first, then act. If you will begin each difficulty with a pause, just a moment of turning inward, a moment of acknowledging God is the only power, you will find that your reaction is replaced by response, your fear replaced by clarity, your panic replaced by peace. And from that peace, the right action unfolds without strain. You will discover that many problems dissolve before action is even required. Others resolve themselves in ways you could never have orchestrated. And still others may require your participation, but that participation will flow naturally, without fear, without urgency, without struggle. Non-reaction is the doorway through which you leave the world of appearances and enter the realm of grace. Let us now enter one of the great mysteries of spiritual living, a truth so simple that the human mind repeatedly overlooks it. God begins where human effort ends. not because God was absent while you were striving, but because your striving occupied the entire field of your awareness. The presence was there all along, waiting, abiding, forever, offering its fullness. But panic, effort, and mental strain act like thick curtains drawn across a window. The sunlight remains, but it cannot enter the room until the curtains are open. And the opening of that curtain is your stillness. Every spiritual demonstration, every healing, every unfolding of supply, every restoration of harmony, every moment of grace in your life has occurred at the very moment you stop trying to make something happen. It has occurred not during your struggle, but during your surrender, not in your feverish activity, but in your quiet recognition that spirit alone does the work. This is the meaning of the ancient words. The battle is not yours, but God's. The battle is never with outer conditions. The battle is never with people, with a body, with a bank account, with circumstance. The battle is always with the belief that you, as a human mind, must manage the universe. The battle ends the moment you relinquish this false sense of responsibility and return to your true identity as the instrument of the infinite. When you become still, truly still, not as a technique, but as an inner release, something begins to happen that is beyond the capacity of the human mind to understand. You feel a subtle movement, not physical, not emotional, but spiritual. A shift takes place within the depth of consciousness. It may be sensed as peace, or as clarity, or as a gentle knowing without words, or it may not be felt at all. Yet, regardless of feeling, the activity of God has begun. And once the divine activity begins, it goes forth in ways entirely independent of your personal ideas about how things should unfold. It works at levels you cannot see, through channels you could never invent, and with an intelligence that surpasses all human reasoning. What to the human mind seems impossible becomes the simplest of matters to the spirit. What appears complex becomes effortless. What seems hopeless becomes a perfect expression of harmony. Let us be very clear. Divine activity does not depend on your understanding of how it works. The tree does not understand how sap rises in its branches, yet it blossoms all the same. The sea does not understand the pull of the moon, yet it responds with tide and rhythm. And you need not understand how God moves in order to witness the fruit of that movement. Your part is only to become still enough to let the invisible perform its perfect work. In your stillness, ideas come that are not your ideas. Solutions appear that do not originate in your intellect. Actions arise that feel as though they are being done through you rather than by you. This is grace not as a mystical concept, but as the living activity of God revealing itself in your experience. You will notice that when you are still, life becomes strangely cooperative. People who were previously difficult soften without explanation. Opportunities unfold without your effort. Supply arrives without strain. The body responds to an inner peace rather than outer treatment. Harmony appears where conflict once seemed inevitable. This is not coincidence, and it is not magic. It is the natural outcome of spiritual law. The outer must conform to the inner when the inner is aligned with the presence. Perhaps the most beautiful part of this truth is that divine movement never requires the cooperation of the outer world. It does not depend on other people changing, nor on conditions rearranging themselves to suit your desires. God moves because God is movement. God reveals because God is revelation. God unfolds because God is the infinite expression of its own being. All that is required is your stillness, your willingness to let the infinite do its infinite work. Remember this always. When you fight, you block the flow. When you panic, you cloud the guidance. When you try, you interfere. But when you become still, when you step aside, when you say inwardly, Father, thou doest the works, you open the channel through which the fullness of God enters your affairs. Stillness is not passive. Stillness is potent. Stillness is the atmosphere in which the invisible becomes visible, the intangible becomes tangible, the spiritual becomes practical. In that stillness, God moves. Now we must bring this understanding into the rhythm of daily living, for truth remains only an idea until it becomes the atmosphere in which you walk, the foundation from which you speak, the silent presence behind every act. Many imagine that spiritual realization is found in long hours of meditation or in retreat from the world. But the true test of realization is not what you experience in silence. It is whether that silence continues with you when the world calls your name. You may sit quietly in the morning and feel the warmth of the presence, the gentle hum of the invisible, and the sweet assurance that all is well. Yet if, within the first hour of your day, the world provokes reaction, fear, or judgment, then the meditation has not yet become realization. The goal is not to feel peace in isolation, but to live from peace in activity. The point is not to escape the world, but to unveil the kingdom that is present wherever you stand. Let us understand this. The presence you touch in meditation is not something you leave when you rise from your chair. It accompanies you to the kitchen, to your workplace, to your family, to the marketplace. It goes with you to the moments of joy and the moments of burden. And if you train your inner ear to listen, you will discover that the very same silence that you felt in meditation is present in every ordinary moment of your day. To live from realization is to carry the awareness of the one presence into every circumstance without exception. You are not attempting to stay mentally alert all day. That would be exhausting. Instead, you learn to rest inwardly, even while your hands are busy. You cultivate the gentle habit of turning within, not strenuously, not with effort, but with a quiet remembrance. God is here. God is the only power. God is the life of all that appears before me. And so you walk through your day with an inner poise, not because conditions are favorable, but because your consciousness is anchored. While others are swept into emotional storms, you remain centered not through discipline, but through recognition. You begin to see people not as personalities with flaws and demands, but as expressions of the same consciousness that breathes you. And this recognition ends conflict before conflict can arise. It ends judgment before judgment forms a thought. It ends separation before separation manifests as pain. Living from realization daily means understanding that nothing is too insignificant for the presence. A conversation with a stranger, a moment of irritation at home, a challenge at work, each one becomes an opportunity to turn within, to remember the source, to abide in the presence. In this way, your day becomes a continuous practice of seeking the kingdom first, not dramatically, not forcefully, but gently, naturally, as though breathing. Do not be disheartened if you forget. Every human being forgets. Every student wanders back into the world of appearances. But you can always return with the simplest acknowledgement, oh yes, God is here. And in that instant, you have stepped back into the kingdom. There is no condemnation in forgetting. The only requirement is remembering. And each time you remember, the remembering becomes easier, more natural, more constant. As this inner habit grows, you will notice something profound. The world begins to respond to your new consciousness. Situations that once troubled you lose their power. People who once irritated you no longer disturb your peace. Problems that once seemed insurmountable are met with clarity and resolve. This is not because the world has changed, but because you are no longer living from the world. You are living from the kingdom within. And very quietly, so quietly, you may not even notice at first, your external life begins to reflect the harmony of your inner life. Supply flows more freely. Health stabilizes. Relationships soften. Opportunities unfold without strain. This is the natural outworking of spiritual consciousness. When you live from the realization of one presence, one power, the outer circumstances begin to conform to the inner truth. This is what it means to live the infinite way, not as philosophy, not as belief, not as aspiration, but as daily consciousness. The spiritual life is not found in occasional moments of inspiration, but in the steady, continuous recognition of the presence in all things, at all times, in all places. And when this recognition becomes your way of life, every day becomes a holy day, every act becomes a prayer, and every moment becomes an opportunity for divine expression. And now, as we bring this exploration to its close, let us return to the beginning, the kingdom within. For no matter how profound the principles we discuss, no matter how deep the realization may seem, all of it points to a single truth. The presence you seek is already here. It has never departed, never diminished, never withheld itself. The only journey you ever undertake is the journey from distraction to remembrance, from outward seeking to inward recognition. If you leave with anything from this time together, let it be this. There is a presence at the center of your being that has never been touched by fear, never altered by circumstance, never wounded by the world. It is whole. It is complete. It is infinite. And it is the truth of you. Every spiritual practice, every meditation, every pause, every moment of silence is only to help you remember what has always been true of your nature. You are not striving to bring God into your experience. God is already the substance of your experience. You are not trying to reach a distant heaven. Heaven is the consciousness you are touching now. You are not attempting to win favor, earn grace, or achieve enlightenment. The kingdom is not a destination. It is your identity, your very being, the silent root of your existence. As you go back into the world, you will meet appearances, some pleasant, some challenging. You will encounter people who forget who they are, and at times, you too will forget. But none of this has the power to separate you from the presence. Your only task is to remember. Remember in small moments. Remember in difficult moments. Remember in ordinary moments. The remembering alone is enough. If you feel lost, turn within. If you feel afraid, turn within. If you feel burdened, turn within. If you feel joy, turn within and give thanks. For in every turning, you rediscover the same eternal truth. I and the Father are one. This is not poetry. It is not metaphor. It is the most literal truth you will ever encounter. There is only one life, one presence, one power, one self, and it is expressing as you, through you, within you. And as you rest in this recognition, something quiet yet profound begins to unfold. You feel guided without effort. You feel supported without asking. You feel loved without condition. The world, with all its noise and demand, loses its authority, and you begin to walk in a peace the world cannot give nor take away. This is the infinite way, not a path of striving, but of surrender, not a practice of getting, but of recognizing, not a pursuit of something new, but an awakening to what has always been. Let this awareness accompany you when you rise in the morning. Let it walk with you through your day. Let it hold you in the stillness of night, for the presence that lives you does not sleep, does not withdraw, does not come and go. It abides eternally, waiting only for your welcome, your acknowledgement, your remembrance. And so, as we conclude, I leave you with the same truth with which all spiritual living begins and ends. The kingdom of God is within you. Return to it often. Return to it gently. Return to it now.